Hi, I'm Scott. Welcome to Synth Stuff. This is the Roland GAIA. And this is the Roland GAIA 2 coming up. The original Roland GAIA, it's been out for 13 years. It was really kind of brought out as both a beginner synthesizer to teach synthesis, but also one that could be used by professionals in a live environment. It's portable, it's lightweight, it has full-size keys, it sounds good, and it's been a huge success for Roland for 13 years. A few months ago it was discontinued, and they brought out the GAIA 2. I have done a comparison between this old GAIA and the new GAIA on another video that I put out last week. I'll put a link to it up here and in the description below if you'd like to see it. So this is the new GAIA. It's very similar to the old GAIA, same full-size keys. Actually, the keys are really nice. It has the same key bed as is used on the Jupiter X. So a decent key bed, very playable, nice controls, not quite as solid as the original GAIA. The original GAIA I think feels a little more high quality in terms of controls, but it's a good compromise. Whereas the old GAIA was its own entity. It was a virtual analog sort of synthesizer that had its own engine that was unique to it. The GAIA 2 is another Zencore synth. So is it just another wrapper on yet another boring Roland Zencore synth? Roland makes these Zencore synths and they're all kind of the same. And they all have the same engines, they all load model expansions, they all do the same thing, they all work the same way, they all have the awful little tiny screen, same menuing system, same. And they just keep pumping these things out with different cases on them and expect people to keep paying $2,000 here and there for more versions of same. So is GAIA just another same Zencore engine synth? Those synths really do not excite me. You don't see a Juno X here, you don't see a Jupiter X here, because there's nothing in those synths that really grabs me and says, you must have this. The GAIA 2 is different. The GAIA 2 is not just like the Jupiter X and the Juno X where it's kind of just the same old thing with a new engine on that. The GAIA 2 really feels like they put some time and effort to make it like for beginners, almost like the old GAIA. It has the ability to sort of do what you would do with a mod matrix, but it doesn't have the complexity of a mod matrix. It has a simple signal chain layout, however it has wavetable and modulation. It's kind of like the original GAIA on steroids. The original GAIA could do basic virtual analog. This new GAIA can do modulated sounds, modern sounds that you hear in modern music today. So it's basically an updated version of the GAIA. And I really like it. I like it enough that I bought one. And why do I like it? Because it sounds good. It has really good sound engine in it. Yes, it can do model expansions. It comes with one. It comes with an SH-101, which is great if you want an SH-101 sound. I've already got an SH-101. I didn't care about that. But I really like the sounds that I heard coming from it, and I like the user interface. So it's now living where my old GAIA used to live. My old GAIA, I'll just sell it. So let's talk about what the GAIA 2 is. It's a 10-pound, 37-key synthesizer. It's a hybrid synth. It has one wavetable oscillator and two true virtual analog oscillators. Unlike the original GAIA that had sampled waveforms for its oscillators, this one has true virtual analog digital oscillators. It has a pad on it, the expressive pad with an XY that you can map to pretty much anything. It has a sequencer, real-time and step sequencer, Arpeggiator. It has 53 different multi-effects that you can select from, and the effects in this sound really good. On top of the multi-effects, it has a dedicated chorus and reverb engine. It also has global effects. You can put global EQ and global compressor on the entire synth. That might be useful if you're going to be using it for one sound for in the studio and maybe a different sound for out on the road, but it's there. It has a Type A USB port in the back. You can plug in USB keys so you can back up your sounds to it, or you can do firmware updates. That USB-A port is class compliant, so you can also plug in a MIDI controller directly into it and use a second keyboard with the Gaia 2. Unfortunately, it's not multi-timbral, so you can't have a different sound on the other keyboard. There's also a USB-C port. Thank you, Roland, for finally joining the 2010s and getting rid of the old printer port on the back of your synthesizers. A USB-C port, you can plug a regular cell phone charger or a battery, like a cell phone battery pack. If you have a power supply that'll supply 1.5 amps, you can actually run the Gaia 2. You could have one of those big battery packs that you use for cell phones that will run the Gaia 2 off battery for hours and hours. It too is class compliant. You can plug it into your computer. It has MIDI ports built in. It also has audio send and receive to and from the Gaia over USB. I mentioned it has model expansions. It comes with the SH-101 loaded, which is in it. I tried it. It sounds like my SH-101. It's not as good as an ACB emulation like you find on the System 8, but it's not bad. You can also get the Juno 106 and the Jupiter 8 for it. It doesn't announce it, but if you look in the manual, you can see on one of the pictures of the screens, it shows the list of model expansions, and they've got one blacked out. But in one of the pictures, they didn't black it out quite right, and you can tell that it says Juno 60. There is not currently a Juno 60 model expansion, so looks like there is going to be one soon. And when there is one, you can load it into this Gaia 2. I think you can also load the JX8P into it, if I'm not mistaken. It has 22 voices of polyphony, which is not too bad. Now that can change depending on, it's kind of the Zencore thing, where if the computing power used to generate a voice is complex, then you might have a little less than 22 voices. But for the most part, you're going to have 22 voices of polyphony, which is not bad. If you're playing a lot of pads, you might get some tone cutoffs if you know, complex chords and sustaining notes. But for this synthesizer at 37 keys, 22 notes is pretty good. It has 256 factory presets and 512 user slots that can be overwritten for patch storage. Not bad. Definitely better than the 64 that we got in the original Gaia. It has two separate types of oscillators. The first one is Wavetable with 63 different wavetables in there with a phase shift, modulation, position, and it is not, you cannot load user wavetables into it. What you see is what you get. And then we have oscillator 2 and 3, which are virtual analog. The filter is it's a filter. There's nothing really special about it. You get low pass, high pass, band pass, with drive, resonance, and you have 12, 18, 24 decibel filter slopes. You have envelope and filter ADSR, just like the original Gaia. We have two LFOs, 5 different waveforms. One of them has a programmable waveform, just kind of like the Hydrasynth does, and each of those can have 4 different destinations. There's a 64-step sequencer with up to 8 notes per step, plus 4 modulation controls per step. And once you've got that recorded in your sequencer, you can do it in real time or step sequence. You can play it back in order or in random at different scales and lengths and mess with the sequencer that way. You have a standard arpeggiator, up, down, random, note order. And you have that tiny LCD screen where they cram all the menus into it in this little low resolution, I think it's 128 by 64 pixel screen, where they try to make all the blocky fonts. Awful, awful, awful. Why do synthesizer manufacturers continue to use these terrible low-resolution screens? Obviously, the Zencore synth system has been designed to run that screen because all the Zencore synths, the Juno X and the Jupiter X, the Jupiter XM, all have that same exact screen. So obviously they have a common driver they've written to work with that specific display. It's awful. Why can't they use a high resolution screen that's easy to read and that isn't postage stamp sized? Anyway, okay, so that's what the new synthesizer is in the specs. Let's try it out, see how it sounds, and play with it. When we look at the new Gaia, it's very similar to the old Gaia. If we look at the old Gaia, we have our LFO on the left, oscillators, then filters, then amplifier, and then we have effects. Patches down here, arpeggiator, other controls up on the left, and of course our D-beam, which doesn't exist on the new one. You can see the lineage is clear. LFOs on the left, oscillators, filters, amplifier, effects, patch selection, playing controls. So it's more or less the same concept, and it is intended to be almost a beginner synth or a learning synth. However, it's far more capable, and what Roland is really pushing on this one is that the Gaia 2 produces motion. So changing sounds that morph and change, which is, you know, a modern sound, which the old Gaia could do with LFOs, but not really in the way that the new one can. The original Gaia had 3 separate tones. Each of these is a synth engine with its own oscillator, filter, and amplifier. They all fed in then to the same effects. However, it basically made it 3-tone multi-timbral. The Gaia 2 is more traditional. We have 3 oscillators, but they all share the same filter and amplifier. So it's not really multi-timbral. You can change the sound with the oscillators, but you can't select between the different tones like you can on the original Gaia. That feature was something very unique to the original Gaia, and we don't see it here. So let's go to an init patch and exit out of where we are here. So we're starting with an init patch here, and let's have a talk about the different oscillators. Oscillator 1 is a wavetable oscillator. Oscillator 2 and 3 are virtual analog. Unlike the original Gaia, which used sample waveforms for its oscillators, probably due to limitations in computing power at the time, the Gaia 2 uses actual virtual analog oscillators. So we have sine wave, triangle, a sawtooth, we have a square, supersaw, and a noise. For each of oscillators 2 and 3, we can listen to those. And we can change the shape of each of those. So if we go into sine, we get a little bit of harmonics. If we go to triangle, get what sounds like some phasing. Sawtooth, we get a sub-oscillator that comes in. If we go to square wave, expectedly we get pulse width modulation. However, you notice it goes from about 50 to 100. It doesn't go down to 0, so it starts at about 50. And we can't go all the way to 100%, so it goes about 50 to 99. We can't go below 50. Then we have the classic Roland supersaw, which brings in more detuning and width, and then our noise just changes the types of noise, and it actually moves or morphs gradually from one type to another. So that basically changes the frequency spectrum of that noise oscillator. We do have the ability to change pitch, octave up and down. We do only have a coarse pitch knob, which does show on here. You can see we go up to 1200, so we have cents in there, 1200 cents that we can adjust. So they've basically combined the coarse and fine pitch knob into a single knob. That doesn't make for fine pitch corrections, unfortunately. It's tough to do. And then, of course, we do have the ability to change the range of that oscillator. Okay, so those are oscillators 2 and 3. Before we go on to oscillator 1, I will say that we do have the ability to cross mod. So we can cross mod works with oscillators 2 and 3 only. And what we're hearing is oscillator 2 and not and it's using oscillator 3 to cross mod oscillator 2. And we also have sync and ring modulation. That's oscillators 2 and 3. Let's talk about oscillator 1, which is our wavetable oscillator. We have 63 wavetables from which to pick, and we can move a position within each of those wavetables. We have 127 different positions of each of those 63 wavetables. So if we just pick one at random here, and actually I'll play a note while I'm doing that so we can hear it. There's a fairly simple one, and then we can change the position in the wavetable. And of course, that position knob is modulatable, so we can give some motion to the sound by having it do this automatically. And we can do that for any of these waveforms. So we have quite a palette of sounds from which to pick inside the Wavetable Oscillator. And of course we can use the Wavetable Oscillator to generate traditional tones as well. If we go to wave 2, it starts out with a sine wave. As we morph it, it goes to a triangle, to a sawtooth, to a square wave. So we can decide which one of those we want simply by adjusting the position. We could modulate between that if we want, but it allows us to use the wavetable as a third VA oscillator. You saw me adjusting the mixer here. That just adjusts the relative volume of each of the oscillators. We have a attack and decay for the pitch of the all three oscillators together. We can adjust the amount that's going to affect it with our envelope depth. So if we adjust the attack and decay, and I mean that's pretty ridiculous, but then you can shorten it and get some bite to your sound. Let's talk about the filter. The filter is not a modeled filter. It's not modeled off any traditional Roland synth like they do a lot of the time. We have a high pass, band pass, low pass with drive, resonance, and we can adjust the slope to minus 12, 18, or 24 decibels per octave. So let's get something with lots of harmonics in it. There we go. There's 24. And then 12. Let's bring in some resonance. That's our low pass. We have a high pass filter as well. And a band pass. We also have drive on the filter. So it's a fairly plain vanilla filter, but it does the job. It doesn't really have a lot of character to it. The resonant portion of the filter does have a little bit of squelchiness, but it's not something unique like you would hear on an SH-101. And of course we do have an envelope that we can apply to the filter as well. After the filter, we have a standard amplitude envelope generator, again with the overall level and tone for the amplifier. So let's have a listen to that. And then we have tone, which is just an overall tone, high, low tone for the sound at the amplitude stage. After the amplifier, we get into the effects, which are excellent. We have a multi-effects section, and then we have chorus, and then a reverb delay section. The multi-effects we're going to be working with primarily in the menu. We can change the type, equalizer, filter, enhancer, humanizer. I mean, I'm not quite sure how many there are, quite a few. The one that I really like is the JD Multi, and that is the simulation of all the multi-effects inside the JD800. So we can change the distortion drive, phaser mix, echo. So we're listening to JD800 effects there. So we have 3 different choruses. No chorus, chorus A, B, which is a combi chorus, and then JX is C, which is, I believe, is the Juno 106 emulation. In addition to that, we have our reverb and delay. We have a number of different reverbs and delays. We can say a shimmer reverb. Modulation reverb. We can adjust the time, the depth, and the feedback, the effect that we're sending. Or we can select, we want to use a delay. We say what type of delay. We want a 2-tap pan delay. And of course that is going to be synced to our tempo. Alright, so we have a multitude of effects, and I'm not going to go through all the different effects, but they are very high quality effects as you would expect from Zencore. LFOs, we do have 2 LFOs. They're fairly simple. We can sync them to tempo if we want, or we can adjust the rate manually. The LFO waveforms have sine, sawtooth, a square wave, a random, and a sample and hold, and a step, which is interesting. And how we assign the LFO is there's a assign button right here. If I push this, you can see right now it's connected to oscillator 1 pitch. That's fine, and we'll leave it there. But say we wanted it connected to something different. While I'm holding that down, I could say twist the cutoff. Now it's assigned to the cutoff. And you can have 4 different assignments, and you can switch which one you want it assigned to just by hitting that button. So if we had 4 different ones, we could switch them while we're playing by hitting that assign button. So let's go back to here. I'm going to change it back to oscillator 1 pitch. And now if I play something on oscillator 1, and we adjust the rate and the depth, we're going to hear that LFO affecting oscillator 1. Now let's have a look at the different waveforms. Here's a sawtooth. And then our square wave. Let me turn off my effects. And here's random, where it's just going to pick different things at random. This is a sample and hold waveform. And then we have step, where we can edit our LFO. And we do that by pressing enter, and then we can go to the step 1, and the depth is going to be where do we want it. We can change the curve, so if you want it to slide up or down or whatever you want to do in there, you can have different waveforms. And then we can go to step 2, and we're going to change that to 10. I think we can actually do that. Yeah, we can. We can do it by just using the pad as well. We'll talk about the pad in just a moment. So now I can design my own waveform that I want to go, all over and do whatever. And now if I play it, you can hear I can do it in real time. So you could use this as a poor man's sequencer, really, an 8-note sequencer. If I put up higher and then lower, and then you could play a scale or play a series of notes on there and link it to pitch like I'm doing there, and it would play that sequence as you actually hold down the key. So that's usable on LFO 1, LFO 2. Both LFOs work independently, and you can assign them to 4 of those things as I showed there. The LFOs are free running, however you can make them key triggered, which I'll show you in a little bit. Okay, let's talk about that Motional Pad. It's an XY pad that allows you to control tones. By default, if we have P-mod or S-mod on, it's going to modulate the wavetable of oscillator 1. So let's go back to Init, and we'll bring up oscillator 1, and we'll select a waveform at random. And now if we hit assign X, now I can shift directly through the position of wave oscillator 1 by moving X and Y on the pad. We also have S-mod, which is shape changing. one of the interesting things we can do with the Motional Pad is record movements. So if I wanted to say, every time I press it, I want it to do this kind of thing. I want it to go like this. Fine, so I hit record, and I'm going to say assign PMod to Motional Pad, yes. And now it's motion record standby, and here we go. All right, so now we're going to turn that on, and now every time I press a key, you're going to hear that. Now that's free running. I believe I can actually change that. Yeah, you can change the key trigger to on, and you can also set it sync to BPM. You can have it snap back to the original position when you're finished. So now, every time I press it, it's going to start at the top corner and do what I drew on it. So that's a way of getting motion on your sounds, and of course I just linked that to the wavetable position. Let's clear that out again, and this time let's say we're going to assign the Motional Pad to something completely different. So let's get out of where we are here. Now I've got a simple init tone, and we've got a super saw. Okay, there's our super saw, and I want to make it so when I go left and right, it's going to adjust the cutoff. So how I'm going to do that is, you can see it says assign X in brackets. That means it's a shift function, so I'll hit shift. And so now it's already set to cutoff, so that's what it's going to be doing. And then shift X, Y is set to resonance. Well, that's what I was going to demonstrate, so that kind of sucks because that's what it's already doing. So let's try something different. Okay, so Y, instead of resonance, let's have it go to drive. There we go. So now it's going to affect drive, and we can change the amount of depth that it's going to affect. All right, so now if I press a note, there's my drive, and here's my cutoff. And I get more drive if I go up and down. So you can assign your left and right, or X, and your up and down, or Y, to any function, just like you can assign the LFOs. And you do that just by saying assign it and then twist whatever it is you want. If I wanted to assign Y instead to, I don't know, the release. Now, you can see it's affecting the amplifier release. So you really can set this to control whatever you want. Playing controls, well, we have the patch selection. We have 3 different overall banks. We have preset, user, and model. Each of those has 8 groups, A through H. Each of those groups has 8 banks, and each of those banks has 8 presets. So that's 256 preset, 256 user, 256 model. We can go into the preset bank. I can say I want group A, so I'll hit Shift A. Now I'm in group A. I can say I want bank 1 and patch 1. So there's A11. And then same thing for 2, 3. So that's how you select patches. The presets patches are factory presets that you cannot change. They're built in, they're hard-coded, they'll be there forever. The user patches are also populated from the factory, however, you can overwrite them if you want. The model patches are for the model expansions. It comes with the SH101 model installed. You can also install the Juno 106 and Jupiter 8 model expansions from Roland if you want. The Roland SH101 sounds pretty much like an SH101. I have one. It sounds just like it. So the only difference between the real SH101 and this model SH101 is that this one is polyphonic. Nice, you have a polyphonic SH101. All right, so now we have those presets available to us. One of the things I did notice, which I really didn't like, is if I start changing things, you can see I got a little star there that says, hey, I've made changes to this. I'm like, oh, okay, I'm doing some sound design here. Or even if I just start with a knit patch and I'm doing some sound work. Okay, so this is the knit patch for the SH101, and we'll make a nice squelchy. Okay, so there's our SH101, and yes, you can use the Motional Pad for the model expansions. So now I'm working on this patch, and I've spent some time, and it's sounding really great, and I like what it's doing, and then I accidentally bump this knob, and it goes to a new preset, and everything I just did is gone. It does not confirm that. It tells you that yes, you've made changes. You know, the little star comes up, but if I hit another patch, your changes are gone. No confirmation. It reminds you if you hit init that you're about to initialize a tone. That's great, but it would be really nice that once I've made changes that it also says, hey, are you sure you've made changes? And I look through the menu and I look through the manual, there's nothing in there, no functions that do that, unfortunately. So there's our patch management. We do have an arpeggiator. Let's hold that on. And we can go into the different settings of that. Duration, shuffle range, and octave range, and so on. If we want to up that a bit. We can change it up and down, or random, or in note order, which I like. So if we say note order, so we have note order. If I play something in order, it's going to play it in the order that I actually played it, which is nice. Again, almost like a pseudo sequencer. We can change that mode from these knobs here. We can also change the octave range, and we can change the scale that it's in. We can change the rate, the scale, and the tempo, and we can change the duration as well of the notes, which is the gating. Pretty standard arpeggiator. We have our tempo knob right next to it here, which adjusts the overall tempo, which is the same tempo that the LFOs will sync to if you have tempo sync turned on. Next, we have a sequencer. This is the same sequencer that you'll see in the TR-8S and a version of it in the Phantom. And it's pretty. If you have used the sequencer in the Roland System 8, you will be very familiar with this. It works pretty much the same way. So we can do a real-time record. Let's first say setting. We want okay, it's 16 steps long. It's it's forward mode, a gate, shuffle, motion, so all that kind of stuff. That's fine. So let's record. And then we'll hit start and it'll give us a countdown. Okay, so there's our fantastic recording. And we can also record record cutoffs or anything else we want to do, we can actually record those motions as well. So now if I stop it and just play it back, you can hear those changes that I've made in the cutoff and the Motional Pad are actually recorded as part of the sequence. So let's clear that out again, clear all notes, and we'll also clear all the motions. So now we have an empty one again. So if I say I want to record, but then I'm going to say edit, now I can just play in the notes. And now I can just play that back. You can tie them, you can adjust the length of individual notes, you can put rests in, you can edit it after the fact. You can again add in motional changes throughout there. So it is the same sequencer you see everywhere. Once you've gotten used to the sequencer, it's easy to use and it's easy to work with. The sequences are saved as part of the patch. So every patch has its own sequence. Which is kind of nice because then it gives you a way of easily demoing each patch and hearing what it's capable of. I will say one of the nice things about this synthesizer is that it has sound remains. So if I play this pad, I can even hold down this. And now I switch patches. It's playing the previous one still while I play the new notes. it's not really multi-timbral, but you are hearing two different patches at the same time. Now that's limited to two, because I can't, if I do it again, it's going to lose the first one. So, but here, we'll do that again. Here's that first one, and then which is a really nice feature. And if it's something that has a lot of release, like this pad here, I can let go of that, and it will just continue playing it as it releases up to the polyphony limit of the synthesizer, of course. The other nice feature that I saw was this hold button, which is, you would think normally works just like a sustain key pedal, but it doesn't. So if we have a sound kind of like this pad, which as long as you hold it down, it keeps modulating in that way, I can turn on a hold and press something. It will hold that. However, when I press something else, it lets go of the original one. Basically, it's lifting and pressing your sustain pedal for you. Kind of a nice feature. It does have a chord mode, so if I hold down chord and then play something in it, now I get that from one key. And it does have velocity sensitive, so if I find a tone, now let's turn up the velocity sensitivity on the amplifier, which means if I play it softly, I have very soft sound, or I can play it loudly. And if I turn that all the way down, obviously I get nothing. So I'm going to turn that up. So I have velocity over here that's turned on, or I can just turn that off, and now every press, no matter how hard I play it, gets full velocity. And of course I have transpose, so if I want to have, if my band says, hey, we need to move this up from F to G, I can just say, oh, but I don't know how to play it in G, so I'm just going to press that, and now it's moved up 2 semitones for me, and you know, the typical transpose function. I do have the ability to play mono and Portamento. And we can have a rollover that only does that when you actually play legato. So that's a standard function as well. A couple other things about the patches. If we do find that we've made changes to it, now we've screwed it all up and it sounds terrible, a shift enter resets it back to what it was. It gets rid of the changes that you've made. Change, when we've got a user patch and we want to write it, then we can just say shift right, then we can pick where we want to write it, and then we can change the name if we want to, and it will write it into whatever patch slot we have put it. We do have the pitch and mod wheels. They are tiny, similar to the JDXi. They are rubber coated, so they feel okay, but I wish Roland had put the stick on this. I really don't like these little wheels, especially the tiny ones like they have on the JDXi. You just don't get enough travel. Especially for the mod wheel, you don't have enough fine control when you're doing massive modulations. And you also don't have the accuracy for the pitch as well. For the different types of tones, well, we have an init button that just basically gives us an init tone. We also have a manual button that we do shift manual. It now takes whatever the controls are on the board and generates it from that. So you might get a sound, you might get no sound, but it's a direct reflection of what the controls are set to at that moment. If we go into any of the other ones, preset, user, or model, we press it, we get a list, and we can go through all the different sounds that we have, and you can hear them as you're doing them. However, we can also see, you can say menu. If we press that, we can change and search by category. So if there's no assignment, electric organ, bell, synth bass. If we want a synth bass, then we can say, okay, we want to listen to the synth bass only tones. That's great. However, it only searches within that section. So we're only searching the user presets. If we want to search through the factory presets, we have to go here first, and now we have the synth bass Or if we want to search through the SH-101, here's our synth bass ones, and apparently there are none. So that's kind of a limitation. I wish you were able to search, if I wanted to say synth bass, I want to hear all the synth bass patches. The fact that there is categorization at all is amazing, because Roland is just totally missing that on a lot of their synthesizers. So thank you for actually adding it, but I wish we could search everywhere, a global search rather than just within an individual section. There are some functions that are buried in menus in this. Unfortunately, they just didn't have enough controls. They didn't want to spend the money to put enough controls on it to reflect all the different functionality. For instance, if we want to edit the LFO and make it a key trigger instead of free running, what we do is when we're at the home screen, we just hit enter, and now we get this graphic design of the signal flow. We can either move around it by using this knob, or we can use the Motional Pad as a trackpad. So if I want to go into LFO 1, now I can see all the different things on LFO 1. I can use the trackpad, or I can use this. I can change all the functions that are on here, and I can say I want key trigger switch on. So now it'll trigger LFO 1 starts every time I press a key down. And you have delay time, fade time, some other things that aren't right here on the control board that you have to go menu diving to find. So be it. If you're going to add a lot of complexity like this, it gives you some flexibility beyond what you have right on the panel. So then we have also our common section for this sound. We can change the tempo, we can change the overall level. If we're going to pan it left or right, we can make it mono-poly. Some of these actually exist. Unison switch, we have unison detune, so if we turn the unison switch on, so if we say turn unison on, and we want to detune those, and then we can also spread them across the left and right. So that gives us a little different sound. We can turn it off, you hear the difference. Off, on. So that's a nice function. And then we can change the category for what that sound is. So if we create our own sound, we can tell it what category our sound is going to belong to, and that way we can search for it when we're doing our category search. We have oscillator mod, oscillator envelope, filter envelope, amplitude envelope. These are all functions that we have over here that for the most part we can get to. There's not much in there that is not on the control board. And then over here, this is where it gets interesting because we have the effects. For instance, we get a lot more view into what is actually going on here. So our multi-effects, we might want to say, okay, I want, let's see, phaser. No, I don't want a phaser. I want a modulation, auto pan. Okay, so that could be one of the multi-effects that we're going to pick from, but we could go to combination. So now we have JD multi, which is the type that we've got selected, and now we have distortion, phaser, SP, I don't remember what SP and EN are. Oh, it's been a while since I used my JD800, but we can change the order that those appear in, so you can see you can reorder those effects. So that means we get 4 for the price of 1. We got 4 JD800 effects in the single MFX slot. And there's all kinds of different controls in there that you obviously don't see here. And then the same thing for the chorus and reverb. So if we want to add chorus and we want to say, oh, we want the JX or the Juno 106. And of course, it's Roland. So Roland's Juno 106 has noisy chorus. If we want to turn up the noisy chorus, then we can do so, or we can get rid of that. But so you can see by moving around in this menu here, it actually gives us a very quick and easy way of getting to the signal chain and editing all those functions. All right, let's do a quick demo track using this Gaia 2. The track that you're about to hear is entirely the Gaia 2 except for drums. So you hear the drums are not coming from this, but everything else you hear is coming directly out of this. No external effects, no processing. The only effects you're hearing are what's built into the Gaia 2. What I like, what I don't like. I really like the category search. I wish it was global, but it works great. I like the sound remain, the ability to change sounds while you're playing and not have that sound cut off. The patch selection seems to work fairly well. I like, I can do it quickly. You have your favorite setup, and there are enough patches. I mean, it's not a huge amount of patches compared to a lot of synthesizers today, but I mean, there's enough patch slots that you can use them. The presets that come with the synthesizer are exceptional. Roland took a huge amount of time designing really great sounding presets on this. It's almost a shame to overwrite some of them. I don't know if you get a whole nother set of patches if you load another model expansion in or not. I already have a Juno 106 and I have ACB Jupiter 8 on my Model 8, so I'm not about to load model expansions in here. I don't even really care about the SH101 because I already have an SH101, so it's kind of wasted on me. But if you do, maybe you can have additional patches stored in there. All right, what I don't like about this synthesizer. I have encountered a couple of bugs. I haven't been able to duplicate them, but I know I have had a couple things go wrong on it. One of them was every other key press, the filter cutoff was opening up. And I couldn't figure out why it was doing it. And it was doing it on a factory sound that I hadn't modified. And I was pressing it and literally every other, it was almost like one of the voice boards on an analog synth was bad. And the filter was just going open, closed, open, closed. Even when I changed patches, it was still happening. And so I just rebooted it and it fixed it. So yes, it's a new synthesizer. It's a ton of software. There's going to be bugs. The Motional Pad. I like the Motional Pad. However, I don't know if this is my synth in general. I did post about this problem and I've had reports back from a couple other people who have the same problem. The Motional Pad, if you push hard on it, it comes up and says Calibrating the Pad, and now it's frozen for a second or two while you're doing it. So every time I go up and I push, a little bit hard on it, it does that. So it's really annoying. If you touch it lightly, it works just fine. But if you put any kind of pressure on it and move it, it comes up Calibrating the Pad again. So that is really annoying. That's obviously a bug that needs to get fixed. I wish there was a light showing what the LFO was doing. Just flashing light that shows with this level of dimness what it's doing, because there's no way of knowing just by looking at this what the rate is, what the waveform is, what is it doing, is it actually running, is it free running, is it key triggered. Having a light like that would really help. Same thing goes for the tempo. I wish there was a light showing the tempo because it's not shown on the screen at all times. The LFO does have a delay that you can access in the menu, and you can set it to be key triggered. I wish you could also set it to be a one-shot, because there is no one-shot. There's no way of connecting an amplifier to something, the ADSR envelope to something. I can't say, hey, I want this amp envelope to sweep through this oscillator wavetable once and then stop. And normally you can do that with the LFO, but it doesn't do it just once, it does it over and over and over again. So having a one-shot option on these LFOs would be really great. That way you could have the key trigger turned on. Every time you press a key, it will sweep through that oscillator and then just stop. Because if I do it now, if I init this, so let's pick the sound. Okay, there's a good one. So now if I assign 1 to position, and now sweeping through that wavetable. I could go into the menu for LFO1. I'm trying to use it as a touch screen, that doesn't work. And we'll say I want that key trigger to be on. And you could also have a delay time or fade time as well. And now if I press it, because if that's turned off, it's a free running oscillator, and it just hits wherever the LFO happens to be at that moment. So let's turn that on. Now it sweeps once per key. However, it keeps doing it over and over and over again. So if we had a one-shot setting on there, which I don't think there is one, no there isn't, we could use that as a one-shot LFO to trigger things like that. All right, I did mention this I think before. Here we've got a sound, and then I'm going to change it, and oh, I like what I've done there. Yeah, okay, I've spent some time working on this sound, and okay, let me change it. Oh, crap, I've just lost it. Everything I did was just gone. And there's no confirmation when you've made edits. So you can see when you make an edit, it puts that star up there to let you know you've changed it, but I can easily change patches and it just wipes it. It's just gone. That needs to get fixed. That's terrible. The pitch and mod wheels I mentioned, they're too small. I wish they just used the regular Roland stick. And this is kind of a big one for me. These buttons do not respond to quick taps. So if I press start stop on this, if I touch it quickly, nothing happens. You have to press it long enough for it to register. Quick presses on any of these buttons don't register. And what's worse, sometimes they register, but most of the time they don't. I think their key bounce routine, or the software in there that does the key bounce rejection, is faulty, and as a result, I mean, especially for sequencer, if it's playing and you need to stop it at the end of a, let's get something. So if you have a sequence playing and you need to time it, you're gonna punch it. Oh no, it didn't stop. So that is awful. You need to be able to, when you hit that, it should stop it every time. And I'm hitting it pretty hard, but just because I'm hitting it quickly, the button doesn't register. And that's it. What do you think? I am actually really impressed with this. I'm really glad I bought it. I was on the fence at first. I heard the sounds. I knew it sounded good, but I thought, oh, another Zencore. But I have no regrets. I'm really pleased with the interface. I'm pleased with the sounds. I think it's a really good synthesizer. And I don't think I'm going to feel bad about selling my old Gaia, because this is a worthy replacement that does everything the old Gaia does and way, way more. Yes, it can be complex, but I think it's also a great beginner synth. I have a video where I cover the top 10 beginner synths, and it does need updating, and I think when I do update it, this synthesizer is going to feature very prominently on that list. So what do you think? Is the Gaia 2 a synthesizer you might consider purchasing? Tell me what you think in the comment section below. If you have any questions, comments, suggestions, leave them there as well. And if you could just take 10 seconds, I really appreciate if you could click like on this video and then subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. It really helps me out. Not only does it show YouTube that you like my videos, because it knows you like synthesizer videos and that you liked this video, then it shows my video to other people that like synthesizers, and it gets it out to more people, which is fantastic for me because then I can create more and better videos for everybody. And that's it for the Roland GAIA 2. Thanks for watching.